How do I know if a food is bad? And what really is considered processed food? I came across these cookies. They said they're keto cookies. Are they good? What about this protein shake? Is this good? Can I take this shake as a diabetic? I just don't understand this whole food situation. I hear about ultra processed food. I hear about whole food. I hear about natural food, organic food. Doc, please explain to me, what food should I be eating? Just explain it all to me. Well, that's what I'm going to do in today's video. I'm going to break down food into 3 tiers, and after you listen to this video, you're going to have a much better understanding of what it means when somebody says a food is processed and how to go about making better food choices. Before we get into this video, I'm Dr. Amina, Goodwin, a physician and a health coach, and I help you get your blood sugar levels down to normal where they belong without having to take more medicines. Why keep normal blood sugar levels, you may be asking? Well, so that you could have great energy levels throughout the day, so that you can control food cravings and therefore control weight gain, especially as you get older, and so that you can just live a longer, overall, much healthier life. All right, food, processed food, ultra processed food. What is food? What's classified as a processed food? Well, let's break it down into 3 tiers. I came across an explanation. Well, this was related to the field of finances. Somebody broke down wealth into 3 tiers, and I thought, this is this sort of tier system can be used for food. And so we're going to talk about 3 tiers, and it's kind of almost in a sort of a pyramid. So essentially, the first tier of food is that food that is not tampered with. It's really as it was provided by nature. That is food that you derive from the land or the sea. So it's going to be all your plant-based foods, your vegetables, your fruits. It's going to be your food from animals, so your meat and from cows, goats, sheep, etc., dairy, all those things. So your food from the land, and then from the sea, which would be your fish, your shellfish, even seaweed is a food, okay? So land and sea, those foundational foods, those are going to be the primary food sources in the first tier of foods, and those are foods that are going to have the highest nutritional content because there wasn't any massive there wasn't any processing, right? So they're going to have the most nutritional content, these primary foundational foods, okay? Then when you move from tier 1 into tier 2, now this is going to be foods that are transformed rather into a more usable form. So this is where now you have those foundational foods and you're going to cook them. That is going to make them more edible in many cases. Some vegetables are very, very, very hard. They're grains that are quite hard. Rice, it's inedible in the raw form, right? Dried beans are inedible in the hard, dried, raw form, right? And so when you transform these primary first tier foundational foods into a more edible form, that is going to form your second tier, all right? You cook them. Additionally, in this second tier is foods that are altered in some way. So for example, cheeses will be cultured, fermented. Milk, right, transferred into, or rather transformed into cheese. You're going to transform dairy also into butter. And this sort of transformation, you're going to ferment sometimes even fruit. So you have fermented drinks, okay? So this is food that's basically transformed to a different type so that you have more uses for it. You also enhance flavors in this way. There's so you can ferment foods and get kimchi, right, from fermented cabbage and carrots and so on, right? And so you have a better flavor. Even wheat, you will grind it and then transform it into bread. So that's just a more like a way that you can use wheat. If you have raw wheat, there really isn't much use for it, but you transform it now into bread. And so that again is the second tier. Sometimes in the tier 2 part of the transformation is to enable preservation, and this would be things like salting of meats, fermentation we already mentioned, and also even canning of foods. That was a very popular thing many decades ago, still done today, but it was a common thing by individuals many decades ago, okay? So essentially, in the second tier of food, you are transforming it to enhance the taste, to make it more edible, and then also to help preserve it so that you can have it available for future use. Tier 3 now, this is where things get interesting and actually confusing for people, because in Tier 3 now, you essentially have what we could say would be like a derivative, right? So you use the base products, the base ingredients to derive completely new foods. And these foods are very much changed from how they were in the nature, and in fact they're so changed that you can't look at them and tell what the actual foundational ingredients are. These foods also tend to be essentially prepared in a factory. They tend to have fancy packaging. There's some amount of marketing that goes around the selling of these foods. And essentially these foods tend to be convenient as well. There's more focus on convenience where these foods are concerned, and they're also fast. So when you talk about fast foods, these are foods that they're ready, instant availability, they're ready to eat. There's no preparation involved, cooking, etc., right? And then another thing more and more now too with these foods is that they tend to be extremely tasty. And for that reason, it's easy to overeat these foods. So when you have your foundational foods, if you don't put much in terms of sugar and even salt to these foundational foods, you're usually not going to overeat them. But when you have these foods that are changed, they have a different feel in the mouth, and then they have added sugars and salt and other artificial flavors, many being artificial, then it's going to be more addictive for these foods, and you're going to be eating more. Another thing as well is that in processing these third tier foods, right, or tier 3 foods, they are going to have a lot of the beneficial natural compounds removed, especially fiber, naturally occurring fat, and even a lot of times some of the vitamins and minerals. And because the actual nutrients are lessened, right, you're left with food that is more calorie rich but nutrient poor. And if you're having these foods more addictive, easier to overeat, then it means that with these foods you're more likely to eat excess calories and therefore put on weight, because you're just overdoing it compared to the naturally occurring foods, which are harder to overeat. So that's a 3-tier system for food, and a better way of thinking of it. The bottom tier is the foundational foods that you get from the land and the sea. The second tier, the food is transformed to make it a bit more edible, also to make it to increase the utility, like transforming wheat to flour to bread, transforming dairy to cheese and butter, right? So you have additional utility with those foods, right? And then the third tier now is those sort of derived foods that are derived or derivatives from the base foods, right? In terms of these foods, right, what's the problem as we get higher up the tier? What problems can we see? Essentially, you gain convenience as you move from from the first tier 1 to tier 2 to tier 3. You gain convenience, but unfortunately you lose nutritional value. And because you're losing nutritional value, you are increasing the potential for health problems, especially the lifestyle related diseases like diabetes, high blood pressure, heart disease, and of course obesity. So what do you do? Like, how do you know what to eat? Obviously, tier 2 is probably the sweet spot, a mixture of tier 1 and tier 2, right? So the base foods that you can prepare yourself or have prepared for you somehow. And then tier 2, where they're not very changed from the base tier, the first tier, right? And so between tier 1 and tier 2, the natural foods and the somewhat transformed foods, striking a good balance between those is a good place to start in terms of trying to eat better in a more wholesome, natural fashion. When you get to that third tier of processed foods or food derivatives with the fancy packaging and the marketing surrounding them, you know that, these foods are more likely to harm my health. So yes, it is marketed as keto. Yes, it is marketed as diabetes friendly, sugar free, and so on. But all this fancy packaging should make you a little cautious and prompt you to turn the label, because these foods are usually in a package. Turn to the back of the package, look at the ingredient list, see what is contained, and if it's unrecognizable things in the ingredient list sounding like chemicals, then you should know that this might be something for me to avoid. If it's a very long list of ingredients too, again, something to avoid. If it has many different names, many different types of sugar, sweeteners, and so on, something to avoid. Okay, so don't just focus on the front of the package where it says diabetes friendly, gluten free, non-GMO verified, organic, farm raised, and so on and so forth. None of those mean anything, because at the end of the day, for the first level foods from land and sea, you don't need a label, because you know exactly what it is by looking at it. The tier 2 foods, usually you can tell what it is by looking at it, but those tier 3 foods, you don't know what went into making them. You just know that they were most likely made in a factory, and you probably should avoid those as much as you can. I hope you all found this breakdown or explanation of food, what is food, and how to tell if a food is processed food, what makes a food processed. Hopefully this breakdown into the 3 tiers helps you, and if you found this helpful, then definitely share it with somebody else who would benefit from this information. Take care, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.